Hey everyone, it's that mathematician. And on this video, we're going to talk about our final topic for functions. And that final topic is something that we call domain and range. And so before we can even talk about what domain and range are, we need to define what they are. So domain is the set of all possible inputs for a function. Okay, and I left out the word inputs because I wanted to write it in blue because we've been labeling inputs as blue. Okay, now you probably can already guess what the definition for range is. And range is the set of all possible outputs for a function. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and write our word outputs in red. So, there are a couple of ways that you can write out what domain and range are. Okay, so let's look at this graph that we have. Okay, and we want to figure out what the domain is. Now, the domain is the set of all the possible inputs for this function g of x. Now, inputs are also just our x values. I'll put that in parentheses, right? Inputs are just x values. And so what I'm really asking is, for this graph here, g of x, what inputs work? Okay, and so you might be thinking, well, if I use 0, well, 0 definitely works because it's on the function. And it looks like 1 is also in the function. And 2 is on the function. Okay? And as we move along, we start to notice that every number after 0 works, right? We have 0, 1, we even have 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 4. But look what happens after we get past 4. Okay? All of these numbers to the right of 4 don't work. 4 is really the biggest that our inputs can be. Our inputs can't be any larger than 4 because the graph of g of x doesn't exist past 4. So 4 is kind of our stopping point, right? It's kind of our stopping point if you want to think about it that way. It's the largest our x values could be. Now, as we move the other way on this graph, and we move towards the left, we start to see that 0 works, negative 0.5 works, negative 1, negative 1.5, negative 2, and then look, same thing that happened on the right side, right? My graph does not continue past negative 2. So negative 2 is kind of the stopping point on the left side. So we would say that my domain is from negative 2 to 4. Okay, that is our domain. Now this is one way you can write it. And if you write it this way, this just shows that it's from negative 2 to 4. All of the numbers in between negative 2 and 4 work. Okay, we also can write this another way. Some teachers might write this in a different notation. And another way we could write this is we could write that x has to be less than or equal to 4, right? X is less than or equal to 4, but it's greater than or equal to negative 2, okay? Both of these different notations are 100% correct. It just depends on what your teacher wants when you're writing this out, okay? All right, now let's do the same thing for the range. Now the range is the set of all possible outputs. Well, outputs is just a fancy word for our y's. So let's look here at our y values. Okay, we want to look at range. And let's look at all of our possible y values. Now, I see on the graph here that it starts here at y equals 1. And it starts to go up, right? It's moving up, it's moving up. We're here at y equals 2. And now we're up here at y equals 3. And then it kind of like does a nosedive and it just starts decreasing. So do we see that right up here, this is kind of the highest that my y values can be. It can't be any higher than 3 because there's no other y values on this function that are greater than 3. So I know that my stopping point for the y values is going to be up here at y equals 3. Now, to figure out what my lowest point's going to be, I just need to follow this graph. And as I follow, I see that down here at y equals -1, that is the lowest that my y values can be. There is no other spot along this graph where y is less than -1. So I would say that my range is from -1 all the way up to 3. Okay, that is the range. If it helps you, okay, it's kind of thinking of where the lowest point is up to the highest point, but we need to think in terms of y values and not x values. All right, and again, I want to show you the other notation that you can write it as. It's kind of the same thing that we did up here, but instead of x, we would write that y is less than or equal to 3, and y is greater than or equal to -1. Okay, again, both notations work. All right, and one last thing that I want to show you, sometimes this helps students out, is that if you're thinking about domain is always thinking about how far to the left and how far to the right does my graph go. And if it helps you, I always kind of draw out this little arrow going this way just to show that domain is really looking at how far left, how far right, what are the values in between. Same thing with my range. I'm looking at how high and how low my graph goes. And if it helps you, you can also draw out an arrow going this way to see that we're looking at how high and how low this graph can go. Okay, that's domain and range. This That Math Magician, and I'll see you next time.